Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 35, Josh and the Collide. In order for the podcast to continue, I really need more guests to volunteer to be on the show. So if you're interested, or if you know someone who is interested, please go to gocorral.com/STS to learn more about how to apply to be on the show. That's GOCORRAL.com/STS. I'm here today with Josh, who's going to tell us about his world, the Collide, and also what it's like to be a new DM. But before we get into like all the D&D stuff, can you tell us a little bit about who you are outside of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a software product manager in my day job. I work with programmers and stuff like that. And then I'm also a gigging creative type. I do either like business consulting or I do like musical composition stuff. Occasionally I'll do photography work. So I like to
Okay.
collect hobbies and creative things to do and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a
Recently got into podcasting.
diverse set. Cool. That's a lot of different hobbies. You got all the gear for all those different things?
I do, yeah. I'm actually sitting in my music studio right now.
Oh, cool. What kind of music do you do?
I do I do a lot of different kind of stuff. So sometimes I'll actually do like compositions and background musics for like a campaign, or I have a band that I've recorded under called Demi V, which is like a sort of really heavy acid washed rock kind of thing. And then I have
Okay.
like acoustic folk sounding stuff. And I'm actually in the studio now recording, or well, in the studio, but I'm recording with a buddy of mine now, a sort of indie rock R&B type thing.
Okay. Do you have a particular instrument, or do you have like a whole collection there as well for what you can play?
That's a fair question. Yeah, I do have a collection. It's a bit of a habit. I've got like guitars and pianos all over the place in here, a cajon, a bunch of like random
Everyone
progressive
has a
stuff.
cajon.
But yeah, of course. That's just the living room furniture for most of us.
Yeah.
No, I have but mostly I sing as the thing that I'm actually good at, and then I just figured out how to do the other stuff to have a reason to do that.
Okay. Well, that's really cool. That's pretty neat being able to like make your own music for like a particular scene or something in D&D too. Like usually you have to kind of just work with what you can find.
It's come in handy. Like there have been a few times I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, this is I can make the sound that I need here or for something. Are you musical at all? Do you play anything?
No.
Oh,
I'm I'm surrounded by musical people within my family, but no, I barely can play the piano.
they're all holding it down for you. It's fine.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. But no, I've searched high and low for like the right song for particular moments in D&D, and it's usually you can get something really close, but sometimes there's just something that's like I want something and I can't quite find it.
And with instrumental stuff too, like how do you describe it better after a certain point? Like I need the epic moment, but in this other time, what the fuck is it?
Right, right. And sometimes it's like, I want something that feels like this rock song but doesn't have lyrics to it or has,
Mhm.
non-English lyrics so that my English brain can just ignore them and pretend they're an instrument.
Yeah, totally. It's a good point about the language thing. I actually hadn't thought of that as far as like using other stuff.
Hmm.
Let's feel that.
Yeah. No, I found like The Who is pretty good in D&D because they sing in Mongolian, so you don't really it doesn't bring you out of a moment. And there's lots of other like Scandinavian rock also works.
Okay.
Yeah. You got to find the right like you still want the vocals to be subtle or like an instrument and not just like screaming.
Yeah, that's fair. There's a sometimes fine line there.
Yeah. Yeah, like Iron Maiden is probably not the right kind of thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Or
Yeah.
Children of Bodom.
Hmm. Yeah. I have used Deathclock before. That worked somehow.
I usually just go like either like instrumental things that I've like made up, or if I find something good, like Pixabay has like a lot of really good like rights free stuff where people just put it up there for you to use it. Pretty cool.
Hmm. Yeah. YouTube actually has a catalog for that as well. I feel like if you mark yourself as a creator, they have a large catalog of royalty-free music that you can use.
Oh yeah, I should probably look into that. Every once in a while, my episodes will get flagged as like copyright content because I'm using a thing that I can, but they tell you like, hey, you're using copywritten stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. Usually, if you just point back to that and say, "Hey, no, this I have the rights to use this," they'll drop it. Um, yeah. I the intro music for this very podcast is actually sourced from YouTube from that catalog. Well, getting more into the D&D stuff, what got you into RPGs in the first place?
So I have played role playing video games for a long time. I think that's probably the more common gateway game nowadays for people getting into it. But I came into like TTRPGs pretty late in life. Like I'm 34, and I just started playing tabletop stuff in earnest like last year, and I got into it because I'm an improv comedian, and a lot of my friends were talking about it.
Another one.
Do what? Oh yeah, yeah, classic. Yeah, I'm checking a lot of boxes right now. Probably gonna check
Well,
some.
I meant just like another hobby for yourself.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Add a
Very
new
true.
one every year, huh?
Yeah, every few months usually I've got something new going on. I'm trying to get my hands dirty with. It's a hectic way to live your life. I've
Yeah.
always got something
Okay.
to.
Well, you mentioned being improv comedian and going from there.
Yeah. So I was a lot of the guys on my improv team were also interested in D&D, and one of them was a dungeon master of more experience than me, having had none. So I think last April or May, I started playing my first campaign with some friends. That was a fairly low stakes, fun homebrewed thing that our DM was putting together for us, and we would meet every other week, and it was fun. And I really liked the sort of role playing aspect of it, and I got really interested in the design of it and the sort of parallels that I was able to connect between what I saw as interesting, like video game RPG theory, right, and then how that ties into or came from like TTRPGs is like the
Hmm.
original way of doing it. And I got super interested in reading about it and was like, oh, I should like document my progress with this and see like maybe how good I can get at becoming a dungeon master. And just decided to in retrospect, I sort of like upended the Tuesday night game and was like, no, I'm the dungeon master now, and we're recording it. But but it's
uh,
been fun. It's been a good time. The guys have all been super good natured about it.
okay. So you came in more as a DM initially instead of a player.
My first like sessions were me as a player, but then I really got more invested in understanding it once I was in the DMC for sure. Before I was kind of just screwing around, seeing like I played like a fairly like I said like a low stakes game with some friends, and then
Hmm, right.
decided to have a new hobby.
So, I mean, you're pretty new. Have you even had a chance to like read all the way through the rules yet?
Yeah, I've been working my way through it. I've instead of memorizing them, I've been trying to learn how to find the answers quickly
Hmm.
or at least somewhat efficiently, if it's something that I need to adjudicate. And then I pulled a couple of more senior DMs onto my table to sort of help me if I ever get stuck with something I haven't like run into before.
Hmm.
But it thankfully hasn't been a huge issue so far. I've got like a lot of the basics, and I know where to look if I'm going to plan for like some kind of like other scene, or if we're going to engage in mob mechanics or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The index is pretty good for that, and the SRD online is also very useful.
Yeah, that's probably what I use the most.
Well, ready to start talking about your world?
Yeah, man. Yeah, let's get into it. No one ever wants to talk about my world, not even my player.
It's that's why we're here. Right. So you said your world was called the Collide. Sort of
Yeah.
getting the name from the event that created it. So yeah, let's talk about like the origin event for your world. Start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the origin event, the world kind of has a more ancient history of having been one sort of singular place, and then there was a cataclysm that happened kind of like the current campaign. It's like 700 years after the event happened, but there's essentially like a god, an eldritch god gets bored and tricks some people into doing some really dumb stuff, and they cause like basically half of their planet to have the top level landmass of a different world from somewhere else just smashed onto the top of it. So like literally, like worlds sort of collided and one glommed onto the other one. And that just sort of resulted in a series of really extreme like physical environments, and the sort of main continent or landmass where people kind of understand the world so far is really kind of mountainous and stuck together, and it ends up being very like uh, colorfully different. Like the west coast is all very like green and lush, and then the east is all very orangey and sort of like stuck in a permanent autumn kind of a look and feel to it.
Mhm. So the cataclysm, was that like, destructive in the same way like the dinosaur asteroid thing was, or is this more like a magical
Uh,
apocalypse kind of thing?
Both, actually. I just sent you the sort of rough draft world map that I made for myself and my
Uh-huh.
players. That's just sort of
Okay.
me quickly in Photoshop, so you can see. But the and can you repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
So is it more of a like just a physically destructive apocalypse? Like there's a landmass coming down and that's kind of like an asteroid
Yeah,
impact, or is it
exactly.
more like a
It was
magical?
it's in terms of like what happened. Like basically the sort of what we would conceptualize as the Eastern Hemisphere got squished and crunched down by some unseen force, like literally squished down. And then the other landmass sort of seeped up out from it and grew up and solidified.
Okay. Okay, so the Earth like absorbed whatever
The spell
tectonic
was,
plates were
yeah,
there before and added new ones.
exactly. Yeah, it just sort of like seeped up around it and got stuck there.
Okay. So it's not quite like, because when I saw your description of it, I thought it could be kind of like the conjunction of the spheres within the Witcher world, which
Mm.
is more of an overlap throughout the world where these two like sort of similar places overlap and then they like things go back and forth in between them. And this
Yeah.
sounds more like there's a specific, you have this half of an apple and it's green and you cut off the green half and slap a red half onto it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's a really good metaphor for it. Absolutely.
Well, I'm also looking at your image here with a green half and a red half.
That helps. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, not as like physically destructive. So like the people in the western half didn't experience any like large earthquakes that knocked every building down and rebuilt
It did.
civilization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
The
it did. Okay.
entire, yeah, everything that was there was basically decimated with the exception of like two cities, and you can kind of see on the map. One's called Elton. It's like their westmost capital city. That was basically leveled except for a few landmarks, and then Emerald Lake, which is kind of in the middle, was another like smaller town at the time. Those are like basically the only two surviving places, and everything else was built out over the next 700 years. And then on the West Coast, the land that kind of seeped up that was placed there had a few cities also already like in place. Like it was inhabited whenever it was stuck to this other world. And so
Mhm.
some of their drama over the last 700 years has become like, oh, we sort of live together on the same landmass now. Oh God, how do we do this? And the crew is kind of living in a place where they've kind of found some normalcy in it. But outside of that, it was like heavily catastrophic after the whole thing went down. And there are even like a few people in the world alive still that were around when it happened. Granted, they're super old and they're super traumatized.
Okay. So I'm still trying to understand this. So on your map, it's split into like left, which I'm assuming is west, and right,
Yeah,
which I'm assuming is east. And you said that the eastern hemisphere, is that correspond to the eastern side of the mountain range here on your map?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that was the one that got sucked down and then pushed
Yeah,
back up.
exactly.
So everybody that was living on the eastern half is gone and replaced by new people. Is that the idea?
Yeah, yeah, and they're presumed dead because they
Okay,
were squished
absorbed.
down.
Yes. And then everybody on the western half of the mountain range had giant earthquakes and stuff that remade civilization, and then they had a bunch of immigrants that were trying to figure out what the hell was going on that were coming over from
Exactly.
us.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
got it. All right. Okay. Yeah. Let's. Why don't you give like a physical description of the world the way it is now? Because yes, you and I are looking at it, but the people listening
But
are not.
yeah, I'm sure this is great radio. Yeah, so the world of the Collide is divided. It's a very the known world is basically a central landmass on the planet that the players engage with. The far north is very cold. To the far south appears to be a lot of sand, and a very tall mountain range runs down the center of it. And there are a few lakes and large mountains on each side of it that sort of have towns sprouted up around them. But there's basically like a handful of towns and metropolitan areas scattered about each side of it. And the left side of the world, or west, if you're looking at it, has what we would call like a normal green grass look with some like yellow sand dunes towards the south and some like really large mountains and snow in the north. And then everything on the east is more mountainous, less foresty, but it appears like all of the grass and trees and stuff like that are a deep red color instead. And all the sand appears to be a more orange clay. And they have fewer but kind of larger city establishments going on there. And there are just various trails and roads that kind of run between everything. But in the center of the world, there are two large mountains that are kind of twisted together as a part of a sort of second accident that happened after the cataclysm. But there's like it's basically two mountains twisting into each other with a little abbey sitting on the top of it that kind of overlooks everything. So the whole
Okay.
continent is very like centrally focused and kind of falls away towards the coasts to the east and the west, and has like a few mountain ranges here and there, but it's really like very tall in the center and then kind of evens out as you go to the sides. But the mountain range does stay pretty tall throughout.
Okay. All right. So the green and red divide that I was talking about before is an actual color difference between the halves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you walk across, like people who travel there actually see different colored trees.
Okay. Yeah. So you got like chlorophyll A side of your mountain and range, and chlorophyll D on the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
Showing off my biology knowledge. Um, so the crown mountains that you talked about, like with the twisting mountain ranges with the abbey on top.
Hmm.
Um, is this the abbey like on top at like the very tippy top of the mountain range, where the sort of the mountains are canoodling together?
Yeah. So the way that I kind of envision that space is the two mountain heads are two mountains pushed into each other that ends up creating like a little bit of a valley below where the tips twist together. So it
Okay.
sits in that valley in the center, like right below the middle of the two mountains twisting together. And it's just a very large, like religious abbey that's dedicated to a patron of the light.
Okay. But it's in the shadow of two mountains.
Exactly. Yeah, it just kind of sits in between where they're twisting together.
Okay. And I'm like mountains usually aren't able to twist like that
Right?
because they're too heavy.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming there's something magical going on in there. Do they still kind of look like mountains with just sort of an underside, or do they look more like, I don't know, a soft serve ice cream is what I'm imagining here?
They do. It's like a weird middle ground. They look very mountainous, but then as you get towards the tips where they're kind of swirling into each other, it is super unnatural looking, and it's kind of almost like the rock is uh, artificially shaped, which we can assume is by magic, to bring them into each other. It was two kind of similar forces that were trying to pull the mountains in on each other. and somebody just got stopped in the middle of what they were doing. And so instead of smashing the mountains in on each other, they just froze there.
Okay. So it does look not just like, normal, this is not how a mountain should look, but also just like the texture of the rock looks strange in some way.
Yeah, yeah. Looks magical, if you will.
Okay. Like sparkly or like, rocks
No, no, I
usually.
just mean like clearly not a man-made thing, like impossible for a human to do, but not
Okay.
like a natural occurrence either.
Okay. I'm just trying to get more specific on it, I guess. I'm not sure how important this is, but like, a rock is a rock. What makes a rock look unnatural exactly is like usually the way it's shaped, which we talked about in sort of a macro sense for the mountains, but we're looking at on a smaller sense.
Like imagine like almost a lazy magic that creates like video games you see like repeating textures. You're like, oh, that's a little too perfect to be a rock.
Hmm.
It's like that. Like it if you look at it too long, you're like, oh, that's the same. Okay, interesting. So they're just kind of putting them here, or what? Like it almost looks manufactured for a
Okay.
mountain.
All right. I guess usually the way I'd think of that for rocks would be really sharp angles. Like a brick doesn't look like a natural rock.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to tell from the map that you and I are looking at, where they kind of twist up and kind of do have a point. But in my brain, it's not so much that as like even the tips of the mountains where they're coming closer together, they're rounded off a bit. Like they're like if you were to start building the idea of two rock structures twisted together with like maybe not quite perfect bricks or whatever, but just sort of with some kind of like telekinetic magic trying to pull them in. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm realizing this is kind of like the Dead Space artifact. I'm forgetting the name for it. Is that a reference for this that you were pulling from?
Oh man. Yeah, totally. That was definitely on purpose.
Well,
Oh my God, you're right. It does look so much like it. Now I can't unsee it.
and it's a convergence of two worlds, so that's
Oh
not
my
quite what they mean
God.
by
Yeah,
convergence in the
totally.
game.
Yeah, it's canon now. Oh man, that's good. Wow. Huh. Dang.
Said
Dang.
Eldritch Horror, that also fits.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Whoops. Um, Dang. I'm gonna have to consider that more. That has some fun implications. I do like doing stuff like that with this world, is like pulling other like direct and explicit references in, especially with whatever my players are into from like a pop culture or just whatever they're talking about standpoint.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I think that's pretty good for the world, like physically. Let's talk about the gods for the world.
Yeah, totally. So the gods of the world here, the pantheon is like sort of loose. There's a few things there are a few gods that I know are involved.
Yeah, did you create your own gods, or did you like use the provided Faerun Greyhawk ones that they
Uh
have? And
Sort of a mixture of the two, but some of the gods we're using are like Torm, like god of justice, is one of the players' patrons, and then trying to remember because my notes are surely not right. I can't remember if it's Columbia or Columbus, the goddess of light.
okay, probably Columbia.
Yeah, probably Columbia. But uh, like on the good side, like those are the two sort of like larger like positive god players. And then what's funny is like so we have our main campaign, and then on the show when we're recording, we have every once in a while we'll break off into abbreviated adventures if like one of the other guys can't make it for a while, or we just want to try something out. And so we'll break out and do like we did a Daggerheart one shot recently, or we did the In the Mists of the Mani Varsha from the Radiant Citadel books, and we just kind of played that as a two shot. And so one of our players turned Mani Varsha from that two shot adventure into a god in this world, but like their godhood kind of comes from being just a really in pop culture idol right now. So we're kind of playing with some of that as far as like how and why like power happens is just sort of because people want you to have it, or popularity or whatever it is.
Okay, that's cool.
And then on the less nice side, like the not I don't want to say like bad gods, but like I took a lot from like the Cthulhu mythos for like the different gods. Like the like one of the figures actually involved in the original Collide is Azathoth, actually, directly.
Okay.
Um uh Nyarlathotep, or however you say that. I do like a lot of the like outer gods mythos for like they're just powerful and don't care about you, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting how those often, like in other people's creations, they just get dropped in directly instead of being some sort of localized version.
Hmm.
So I think that was done for a lot of different D&D pantheons, and for World of Warcraft too, I think.
Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah. Yeah, they kind of like have references to it that are a little more direct.
I was thinking about the Columbia Goddess of Light that you mentioned. Is that the like Columbia Pictures, like the production company?
No, no, I was reading through some of the like Forgotten Realms pantheons of stuff and just trying to look for like deities that we could use or refer to that maybe had interesting ties to other gods, or I could use like flavors of
Uh-huh.
maybe, or pull inspiration from without using the direct literal deities. Like um the other positive god, the god of justice, Torm. The only thing he really has in common with Torm is the justice part. Like his personality is like, I don't know, kind of like a lumberjack, but he's like a big bearded guy that rides on a scorpion that also has a beard. So
Okay.
it's interesting. We give it like a fun bit of levity, I guess.
Okay. And do the gods have any defined relevance for them within your campaign, or do they feel more like they're sort of distant, like faraway deities?
Some of it is going to kind of depend on what the players end up wanting to do. As far as like one of them is a paladin of
Hmm.
Torm, and so I think there's like really a great opportunity to play into that more. And I have some stuff written where they can get close to the gods essentially, or the sort of current representation that they have in the realm. But I don't like the players haven't seemed as into the depth of the pantheon and trying to fill that out as much as some of the other stuff that they've been up to. So I I it could make an appearance, but I kind of like what they're doing with like using it as character flavor, and then if I have to have like some big thing for them to deal with later, there's like people that work with some of the gods directly, who have kind of come up close to them. But other than that, I don't know that I know enough to like responsibly let them go deal with, like Bahamut or somebody directly, and do something thoughtful in the world with that, just from like a writer's perspective.
Okay, so it does feel more like it's a present for when you want it story element, but not one that
Yeah.
you're directly involving in a very like, oh, it's Sunday, your characters all have to say their prayers and go to church
Yeah,
kind
no,
of
no,
thing.
no, no. Yeah, definitely not.
Okay, gotcha.
But we will do stuff like if any of them were to like violate an oath of one of their gods, I have some stuff locked and loaded and ready. But they're all good role players that haven't done that so far, so I haven't had that fun.
Cool. And do you have anything that's on like a smaller scale, like sort of a comparison is like Saints, that kind of thing, or?
I haven't really thought it through well enough for most of them. Since the it's funny you say saint. There is like one person in the actual Temple of Torm that one of our characters has worked with. He's the closest they've come into uh, like he's the only one that's really thought out right now. But I do have that as like a sort
Mhm.
of title that somebody can earn in like figured out is part of the of the way that the Church of Torm operates, and it's kind of less about him and more about what they do. So they've met like a saint named Saint Cuthbert, and then there presumably could be others, but I don't really see it as like, I don't know. I feel like saints, he like in the real world, we think of these like mythical people that accomplished something, or they've been raised to a kind of mythic status within their respective religions. So maybe not in that same way, but probably also because magic is real, so like, it would be less impressive.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects of religion that in our world feel very different within a fantasy world where there's more of a easy way to point and say, yeah, here's what my religion offers you, and it's, all of these very tangible things that come from the deity instead of a more sense of community with sort of magical promises outside of that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, well, what about like the sort of we have our D&D races and politics. How does that fit
Mhm.
into your world?
Yeah, so the races and the politics, and then how people come together. It's very much like a part of what I wanted to do was have like a space where I could just not feel bad about making mistakes, and so that's kind of built into the design of the place. But with the characters and the races and the other NPCs available to them, I didn't want to do the J.R.R. Tolkien thing of like all the dwarves live in the mines and all of the elves live in the forest, and
Right. Yeah.
it just doesn't feel like, especially like for 700 years, really, we didn't have any sort of, it's like I did a lot of like cross pollinating of things, and like none of the towns for the most part are of a singular race. Like it's a lot of people that have become intermingled, especially as the two like separate kingdoms have had to become more intermingled over time. That it
Yeah.
exists on each side of the continent.
Yeah. I think almost every country within like Earth is like 10% immigrants or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So something more like that. Like honestly, probably even more mixed up. But yeah, definitely like they were in a mining town and they talked to several like dwarves and humans and elves and like a dragonborn, and so yeah, try to keep it like really mixed up and have more like regionalized dialects for like how the characters may like hear NPCs talking in some of the different areas.
Um, okay, well, what about for like the different halves for the races? Like when Faerûn had its like overlap event for fourth edition to explain
Mhm.
all the changes, that's when Dragonborn showed up from the the other half sort of thing that overlapped with the Forgotten Realms. That's where
Right.
Dragonborn came from. Is there any like separation for races for that in the Collide where there's like a western half race and like an eastern half race that have since kind of ceased being that way?
Absolutely, yes. So you still see variant humans, which come from the western half, or sorry, come from the eastern half, the right side there. That's kind of like variant humans, or just like as we know, like just essentially they're humans, right? But maybe a little bit different. So there's like distinct differences, and then there's like over time they just kind of become like less important, but there will be like superficial differences between a dwarf that maybe has like lineages more from the east than the west, but like a lot of people, especially the shorter lived races, have been doing more like interbreeding and crossbreeding. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not like mechanically important. Like there's not uh, a difference in a dragonborn from the east versus the west in terms of what they can do, but like there are like different like visual things that we've done like aesthetically with the characters or the NPCs, or just like who lives in these places. And so there's like you can tell like if an NPC or a character in the world is like from a different spot. But yeah.
Okay. Have you done anything kind of like the background extra stuff for your world?
What do you mean?
Um, there's some optional rules where you can have characters have like a background that gives them like a little tiny bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love the little character background things. So for our first campaign, one of our guys is playing a bard actually from that island off to the far west called the Milo Isles,
Uh-huh.
and and he has a background as it's like a folk hero because he like stopped a or he discovered as a kid that like a wagon had like a soul stealing curse on it or something like in that area, and it's actually come into play like a few times in the campaign too where they could talk about it, and he like got inspiration on a couple of roles from it. I absolutely love it because it also like they just kind of built things into the world as far as like who the characters were and where they come from, and it just makes for fun like role playing opportunities too.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So your character, your players are making like their own little backgrounds that fit for stuff like that. I guess what I meant was like regional ones that are more specific to your campaign. Like, there's you mentioned Elton and Emerald Lake and how they're like the surviving cities, so you could have like the surviving city background kind of thing.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I totally misunderstood. Yeah, that makes way more sense too in the context of the conversation. So, yeah, Elton definitely has like a really storied background, and I have a sense of like some major history points for it. Like, it is itself actually, it's kind of been building on top of itself since it was first created, and so they've actually got like literal layers of history that they can go visit if they go
Hmm.
down far enough
That's cool.
into the ground. And then the other places all have like maybe less established histories, but some of them like Ofen, Hasfenth, Emerald Lake, like I have like really good ideas of like how they came to be. Like Ofen is a fishing town on the coast. Hasfenth is like a mining village that's like nestled into the mountains. That's probably only like a few hundred years old, but it carries a lot of like baggage as far as like how the collide happened in the first place and being like one of the places that people were kind of conspiring from in order to make it happen was kind of in the same area that the town popped up around. And so there's like stuff over time that's happened in the areas that kind of informs the places. And then I stole parts of areas from real life too as inspiration to kind of build into it.
Okay. Um, so we were also talking about race and also politics. Was another aspect of that discussion. Like, there's this trend within history for stuff to go towards making larger nation states and then having sort of organizations of nation states.
Mhm.
And then, initially people lived in like, small little family units and then villages and then larger cities.
Right.
And I was thinking like an apocalypse would kind of set stuff back in a sense for that.
Mhm.
Um, so where do the people that live in the Collide stand right now? Are they still kind of like city-state level, or are they getting to kingdoms?
They have two kingdoms essentially. So what started the collide to even happen in the first place is a king of Elton on the west coast got like super greedy and was trying to uh, remove a neighboring kingdom and with
Ah,
the collide and thought he was going to be replacing it with just blank empty new land. And so when the collide happened and the other area popped up with people already living there, it created some problems. So he not only like halved the like continent in terms of like space that he would have access to. They like decimated a lot of towns, set themselves back like technologically. They were kind of burgeoning on maybe getting away from like empirical systems of rule and ended up getting stuck on that instead. And so like the West Coast is an empire and the East Coast is another monarchy. It's just like a more traditional kingdom. But the East is a little more like they're kind of progressing out of that, where the West is kind of stuck in the more traditional, like empirical politics, because their king has kind of been alive forever and won't let
oh,
things change and evolve. So you actually find this interesting duality of things are changing faster on the East than they are out in the West.
okay. That was going to be another question I had was, is it still the same dynasty? Because dynasties usually don't last 700 years.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it
So
sounds like it's still the same
there's
person.
some, yeah, it is actually. And that's some of their the campaign drama the adventurers are getting into is like how is it this same person? It has been so long. What on earth? And so they're kind of in figuring that out. It also has ties into the collide happening.
Yeah. Magic, baby. What else do you want answered?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So there's this overarching feeling that like the western half caused the collide, which was bad, and they're like an evil expanding empire. And on the eastern half, it's sort of progressive for whatever that counts within the medieval pastiche that makes D&D what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And what are they like from like a more cultural aesthetic perspective?
So it's like the West is definitely a sort of I had a different vision for it initially, but with how the game has been going, it's definitely more of like high fantasy California, but also like just in terms of like who the everyday people are. But there is definitely like a fairly rigid, if not always super capable, empire at play too that has their hands in at least the larger machinations in most of the cities, and then in the smaller towns they have like ways of making their presence known. But a lot of people end up feeling fairly independent, and so you just have like a lot of like very like community based people for the most part in a lot of the smaller towns, and then you get into the city and it's very high ed, superficial, kind of glitzy. And then the East, I actually don't have as much fleshed out just because they haven't been out there yet.
Okay.
But in the Southeast, you'll notice there's like the little like clay sand area.
Hmm.
There's two towns there. There's one called De La Ye, and then another little thing on the coast called Reproach. And in those places, there's no magic. It is literally like a Wild West town, like spaghetti Western type thing.
Uh-huh.
If you're in those places, so that area is like particularly rough and tumble and aggressive, no nonsense. But outside of that, everything to the north is fairly like metropolitan. Like even all the small towns are gradually becoming more and more connected with like less wildlife in between them.
Okay. I mean that's a good answer. It's not quite what I was going for. I meant like,
Shoot,
we
sorry.
have sort of no, it's fine. Like it was a good answer. What I meant was like, they're in usually stuff ends up being sort of put into boxes where you have like here's the Eastern Orient nation that has ninjas and samurai, and here's
Oh,
the French nation where everyone has a stick up their butt, for how Americans view that.
I
And then here's the here's our Venice analog that has everyone lives on a river, um uh, and here's the Arabian people live over here, like that was kind of what I meant, like for the
oh, I
different
see.
halves, so they have sort of that kind of aesthetic. And I think your answer was good. It was just a little different than where I was going initially.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, a lot of that. Well, so initially, no, but with my players, so like that Miles of Isles area will end up having like a very heavy like Asian influence. It was painted as sort of like Pacific Island feeling type place. A lot of the magic that the player's character uses ends up being like his dancing lights are like little Asian lanterns dancing around, and like
Okay.
horse-drawn carriage type stuff. And then the city near it, not so much. It definitely like in my head has more of like your typical like European high fantasy feel. And then the weirdly enough, the town to the north on the west coast there, Ofin, is like a fishing village, but everybody ends up having like a New York vibe. Because one of the characters from the players is from there, and that was the accent he gave her. It's like that's everybody from there now. So they all sort of speak like they're
Yep.
from the Bronx in various ways.
Okay. Yeah. I have a country in my world that's German because of that reason.
Nice. Nice. I have pulled out a German accent for a few characters, so I have to figure out where that's gonna be from. But yeah, sometimes I'll just use things and I'm like I'll figure out later what it ties into.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense to me. Thank you.
Yeah.
So your plan is to like sort of develop that more culturally for like the eastern half as needed for like when the players go there. Is that the idea?
Yeah. Yeah, I have maybe loose ideas in notes, but if I've learned anything over the last like 6 months, it's that whatever my ideas are going to be, they're probably going to come up with something cooler, and so I've just been, or they're just going to blow it up anyways. So it's been more fun to kind of wait and evolve it with them instead of trying to have too much hashed out, especially because it was like just it's essentially just supposed to be a sandbox for me to make mistakes as a new BDM.
Mm, right. So you're using D&D. You've got all the normal trappings you mentioned, like elves, dwarves, and other stuff. So are we using the usual medieval technology level for your campaign?
Yeah, for the most part. There's some stuff like for flavor. One of them has a speaking stone that is essentially a cell phone.
Uh,
Like he took a selfie with it and it just sort of engraved onto the stone. And so like for flavor, we'll play with stuff like that. Or instead of having video calls, you can get a scroll magically sent to you that's a rendezvous. And so you could just be like magically in a virtual meeting. So we have like e- equivocations of technology in various ways that are just fun or fit a narrative. But other than that, yeah, it's largely like the typical high fantasy trappings, medieval world.
Okay. In your survey, you mentioned guns for like the no magic area in the southeast.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So in Reproach in particular, it's like a gunslinger town. I have a one shot written for it, but basically, like most people there carry firearms because everything around is super dangerous. There's undead people all over the place. Not to mention the local wildlife and some of the vegetation, and so they just carry firearms in those places, whether it's like a rifle or a six shooter.
Um, and why have the guns not moved outside of that area?
It's not that they haven't. It's more that I think that they would struggle to be as effective once you get into places that are more. It's well, not as effective in terms of like tactical, but like I just so far a lot of the mentality of characters and stuff is just like, oh, I don't. That's what the people out over there use. Like we've got magic. Why would we do that? They have toilets too. That's ridiculous. Plumbing, what? So
Hmm.
I think some of it's just like, oh, we don't need that. Kind of like they've been around for 700 years at least, and there's still horse-drawn wagons everywhere. I just
Hmm.
don't think that any other options have really kind of caught on for them, and there's not like a necessity out of that area. Whereas there, it's kind of your most powerful option.
Okay, so it's kind of like Japan had this like hatred of firearms kind of thing.
Ooh, yeah, yeah, very similar idea.
Yeah, they're viewed as like dishonorable, like if you can't kill someone with your own skill, because it's a weapon that doesn't take nearly as much skill as swords or spears or bows and arrow.
hmm hmm Yeah. Pretty much that. Yeah, just gonna copy paste that into my world notes here. That's real now. Yeah, that's totally what that's inspired.
Okay. And in your survey, you said that you did like a an adventure inspired by the Bang card game for the that was it the one
Yeah,
shot you were talking about?
yeah, that's the one shot. Is so the card game Bang. You kind of I don't know if you've ever played it, but
I have. I
everybody.
played it a whole bunch.
Oh my God, I love it so much. My buddy, one of my players actually introduced me to it, and it was like after I just started DMing, and I was like, I need to use this as a theme for a one shot. So I have this like adventure where they all get to pick a side, whoever the players are. They can decide if they're going to be on the good side or the bad side, and they're going to save the town of Approach or they're going to take it over. And they end up discovering through that some of like how the magic went away, but everybody kind of has to have a firearm and they're going to be on a side, and it's I think a fun opportunity to play with like different gaming mechanics that aren't just like I cast fireball or whatever it is with like a medium level player.
Do you do it as a D&D game or do you use the Bang cards anyway
It's
for it?
a D&D game, and then I want to like sprinkle in the like parts of Bang. So the idea of like distance and things like that, I think are cool, and you can equivocate it with like actual distances in D&D. Having played Daggerheart, I actually think that that system might be maybe better suited for it in terms of how you, but they don't do initiative, so it gets messy. But you could almost just play it with the bang rules, like the way it works. And I do like some of the stuff, like you have the character who's the renegade that's kind of out for themselves and not everyone else.
Right.
And so I like some of that being used as like story elements, sort of give somebody an opportunity to maybe role play something a little bit differently and surprise the party at the end. Or, but for the most part, yeah, it's like D&D rules, and then I like bend a few things to be more like Bang.
Have you ever played the Cash and Guns game?
I have not. Cash and Gun. What is that?
It's if you like Bang a lot, I think it's a great game to try out. Cash and Guns is a card bluffing game that's trying to replicate the experience of the Reservoir Dogs movie,
Okay. Okay.
where like no one knows who to trust in that scenario, and everyone's just trying to grab all the money for themselves. Is the idea of the game.
Does it start at the end too, where you've got like the? I guess it couldn't, but No, that's cool.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Uh, there's like a pot in the middle, and you're like trying to, grab the money, and um, you only have a certain amount of bullets in your gun, and you have to kind of bluff and point your gun at people, and then they can like give up and give you the money, or you can take it, or you can say that you are going to shoot. Yeah, I think it's a lot of fun.
Oh man, yeah, I'm just looking at it online too while you're talking about it. It looks rad. I love the idea of this. I'm definitely gonna have to check this out.
Yeah, it comes with a bunch of little foam guns for you to play with. And yes, one of the people in the group can be the mole, and their goal isn't to get money. Their goal is to just survive and call the cops.
I'm definitely gonna have to mess around with this and use it to take some notes for my one shot here. Dang. Good recommendation. Dang. Yeah, bookmark that for later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to get into more games like that, like more of the like tabletop role playing game light, if you will. Like you have a reason to get into a character or whatever, but it doesn't take a commitment of like 2 years to get through the content.
Right, right. Yeah, it's just you're playing it for one night, and yeah, everyone has a character, but you could play it just as a game instead of trying to like get into character. But it's way more fun if you do like do the New Yorker mobster accent that goes
Yeah,
with it.
that's the thing with Bang too. Is like when we were playing it, like everybody had their cowboy accent and what you were gonna say to your buds if whatever
Mm-hmm.
went down.
Yeah,
And, yeah,
yeah,
it just makes it way more fun.
yeah. We always require that the sheriff do that when I play with my friends.
That's fair. Makes sense.
Okay, so we got the Bang card game inspired adventure where they're trying to figure out why that area is a dead magic zone, um, which I'm assuming is something to do with the collide. Um, is that something you feel like you can answer on the podcast, or you want to keep it secret from players?
I mean, the most of the players have helped me write a lot of it, so they'll figure it out anyways. If they the town is like the non-magical of this town is not like directly related to the collide, but like it happening did allow a lich that was kind of conspiring in the area to accomplish sort of deadening everything except for necrotic magic in the area, and he's kind of buried very close to the town, but like in the sort of canyon area nearby, and he just sort of took advantage of like dampened abilities of whatever was kind of holding him back whenever this area was still wherever it was before the collide happened. So he kind of like got pulled away, and because his original jailers didn't have access to him anymore, he could kind of do that in that area. And
Okay, so this is a guy that existed like in the old version of the Eastern Hemisphere. Is that what you're saying?
he existed in where so like the like city on the east of like Persia and Reproach, and like they all like, well, not Reproach, but like a lot of these other places did exist, and they kind of pushed up with the other ground when it appeared. So there was like some stuff that was brought here from wherever the original landmass came from that were cities and buildings and entities as well. And so like the this bad guy is one of those things that was brought, and they just didn't know because he's buried underneath where all the sand is at.
Okay, so was imprisoned in the new continent that came during the
Yeah,
collide and was
exactly.
not part of the old one. Okay, and then that reshuffling broke his prison, so he was able to get free.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Okay,
then
gotcha.
players have a way of figuring this out, but a thing that has consequences for them later is like the Lich is working to expand the like non-magical zone. That's kind of like his end game, is he wants to just do that over the whole continent if he can get away with it.
Because it doesn't bother him because he just uses necrotic magic and he likes
Exactly. Yeah.
it. Okay. And the sort of desert area on the Western Hemisphere is not affected by that.
Correct. So far, it seems like everything that's over in the Western Desert, which is a little bit smaller, but it's not yet impacted by the non-magical energies. It's normal desert.
Okay. Um, well, do you want to start talking about like your actual campaign?
Yeah. So the campaign is the first campaign is my first campaign as a DM. It's all for the most part like homebrew in terms of story, even if we might be like referencing other things.
Hmm.
And it's the adventure party has kind of been pulled unwittingly into a series of events where they've found out that some bad folks are trying to cause a second collide, and do something else to like greatly alter the face of the continent here. And so they're trying to figure out how to make that not happen. And at the same time, they find that they are having their efforts impacted by what is referred to in the campaign as an outbreak of time travelers, which is like a group of people that are kind of messing with either their backstories in various ways or what they're supposed to be doing to kind of prevent this from happening. And so they've got like these agents of chaos that are trying to undermine them at every turn. And then they've also got like this group of evil that is trying to actively start a new collide. And so they're at odds with two different groups, and they don't really know why yet. But they know that if they have their way, that things will probably change very, very drastically over the face of the whole continent again.
What would be the reason to do that again besides, I don't know, some maniacal villain kind of thing?
So the I don't know that it will ever really matter for the players, but the sort of current working reason is that the planet itself is being shaped and faceted in a way that it's eventually going to be cut as like a giant cosmic jewel. And so you've got like eldritch gods that are basically sticking stuff together because they want to turn it into jewelry, essentially, is like a hyper simplified way of looking at it. But
Okay.
the people there, if they can't stop it, they're just kind of like pawns in a larger game where the gods at play don't even really care about them or see them as uh, opponents in any way. They're just kind of like infesting the surface of this thing that the god is using for his own purposes. Like if I were to pick up a rock and I don't care about the microorganisms living on the surface of it.
Hmm. Yeah. I felt like the comparison of like people to ants in that
Yeah,
situation is
exactly.
usually
Yep.
feels very captures it really well.
So it's not like overtly malicious, but they also just don't care about what will happen in the long run. And then in the world itself, you have people that live in some of the like modern cities and stuff belong to like religious organizations that work for those gods essentially, and they might not know what the ultimate plan is, but they're kind of subservient to the god and have been like promised some level of power in the future to get the thing that they want to happen. And so they're like setting up these little ley lines across the surface of this planet essentially to cause other rifts in space and time to make things collide again, as a way of kind of appeasing their god.
Okay. And are the forces of good, are they aware of what's happening and actively trying to stop it, or more just like whatever the bad people are doing, we want to stop it?
They are becoming more aware of it. The A lot of the folks that the party is working with right now don't really know what's happening. That it's just becoming clear with the party. They all got like essentially they were forced to be patsies for another evil guy who tricked them into uh kicking off the first cataclysmic event that's supposed to let this happen by opening a rift in time. And they squashed that like instantly. And there's other people that are like in the main capital city that the players haven't gone back to yet. They're actually kind of in a swampy area right now.
Hmm.
But there are others that like have an inkling of the fact that like there are forces at work that are related to these gods, and so it people are figuring it out, but it's really early on.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a long way of saying that same thing 9 different times. Tight.
And for the time travel component, that like time travel is very interesting to me. So how is that working?
So the first bit of time travel that they did was they kind of got tricked into going back into time, and they landed in the bodies of three NPCs and had to kind of behave as them and try not to change time. Spoiler alert: they did change time, and so they've just been like initially it was used as a gut punch for here is why you're screwed. just somebody messing them over as like these agents of chaos, and then they actually are going to have to deal with the time travelers in like a number of different ways. So I have like opportunities from the character's past that we might try to revisit in some ways, or there are just situations that they have coming up that I can use the time travelers as like a device for who their opponent might be in some of the areas that they want to go visit or adventures that they're getting up to. But the actual mechanism of it hasn't happened to them a lot yet, outside of the one scenario where they were kind of like put into different bodies. But eventually they'll kind of get into a space of like, I want to set up, not like, because we recorded on a podcast, I try to have some of the adventure figured out ahead of time, and some stuff a little bit on rails in terms of like where they're going to go and what's going to happen. And so I know for some of their character stories that there will be reasons that they kind of have to go back and revisit like parts of their past, or like pivotal moments in the history of the continent that might change whatever is there now, or become reasons for like other events that I kind of want to tee up to happen moving forward. So it's
Okay.
more of a plot point and less of like a thing that they can use at will.
Okay, but you're planning on bringing it more like into the
Yeah,
game in a continued way.
yeah, exactly. It'll be like they have like three um like arcs essentially that they're gonna like little like mini arcs that they'll go through that'll have some really heavy ties into like time travel and like the implications of it for them and for the kind of world at large, based on what they get up to over the course of what we've kind of teed up here as like the last 700 years.
Okay. And is the time travel that they're doing always in the quantum leap style where they're jumping into someone else's body?
No, that's gonna like the first time they did that, it was set up as a trap in a scenario where someone needed them to blend in. And then in the future, they're going to actually be, well, in other time travel adventures and scenarios, my plan is for them to actually time travel and have to deal with like, oh, what if somebody sees this bard like as an adult in the time when he's supposed to be a baby and stuff like that.
Hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like you're allowing them to change time. And I guess the usual question of that is how do you work paradoxes into that?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Like, cause, and that's like a lot of the, I guess, the trick of time travel. It's almost like there's a reason you shouldn't do that with your first campaign. But the some of it too, I want to kind of like lean into the mess of that a little bit. Um, I don't know exactly how, because they haven't like done that to me yet, where things have been so bad. We have to figure out the sort of non-realities of it. But there are agencies at play, like in the world of like being able to time travel. Like there's it's in this world, it's super looked down on. Like it's not cool to be doing. And so there's like authorities that kind of become aware of it that try to keep things fairly stable. Because I like the idea of like a linear time where you can't go um back to the like, let me just go back and change it and then come back and it'll be fixed. I'll be in a different reality. Like I want them to kind of be stuck in whatever happens, like with the exception of anything like too crazy by having the guardrails of some kind of an authority. But I really kind of want to see what happens from a storytelling perspective. And a lot of the time travel will be putting them in really carefully curated moments. So it's not like they'll be able to go back and like, well, I don't know. I'm not going to say they can't go back and do a thing, because every time I've predicted that, the players have found a way to prove me wrong. But
Okay.
it,
So it's more controlled through your ability as a DM to prevent them from having the option to create a paradox.
yeah, I'd like to avoid that. But honestly, if they come up with something fun or funny, I'm not going to. I mean, the rule of cool abides, you know?
Okay. Um, so I've been planning a time travel campaign for my own campaign world, and I've been looking at there's a RPG system that's designed for using time travel not just as like a plot device, but as like this is the primary way that characters solve problems is by using time travel. Um,
Ooh, that's cool.
so you could like for example, you could walk into there's a building that's locked and you need to get into it. So you time travel back in time before the building was built, position yourself in the room that you want to be in, and then time travel forward in time, and now you're inside the building.
Nice. Nice.
Um,
Yeah, that's cool.
and it has rules for when you create paradoxes that you take kind of the equivalent of like sanity damage. Do you know the sanity rules in D&D?
Vaguely. I've like briefly looked over it, but I'm not super deeply familiar. I couldn't like run a game on it.
Okay, yeah, no worries about it, but you can look it up later. But and the idea is that if once your sanity gets to a certain level from creating too many paradoxes where you get too low, um, then your character gets sort of absorbed by the current moment in time. So, like, you stop being, PC Joe the fighter, and you end up being whatever fits with whatever moment in time you are. So, if Joe is currently fighting a bunch of orcs as a time traveler and he commits some sort of paradox thing while doing that, the world will absorb him, and since Joe is surrounded by a bunch of orcs, Joe becomes an orc from that time that fits within that time.
Uh,
And then the other PCs have to like break him out of it in some way.
that would also just be a cool like character backstory to discover about like a player
Mhm.
character later. It's like, oh, they actually did come from somewhere else, but they got blended into this. But that's cool. I really like that as like a use of the you said that was with the sanity, not stress.
I mean, you can use whatever system
Uh,
you want. Like this is a different RPG system, so it's
oh
a
yeah, you
different
said this
thing.
was something I meant to ask you what the name of that was.
Time Watch.
Yeah, definitely gonna have to look into that. I want to find like I feel like I have some cool like maybe ideas for scenarios, but I want to like look at other TTRPG games and systems because like on one hand there's like I guess inspiration for how you can run systems of time travel like that. On the other hand, I really like the idea of rotating through even like or similar or whatever kinds of rule sets for different like mini adventures even within the campaign. So like sometimes we'll break out into other rule sets and play a two shot or a one shot adventure or something abbreviated. But I
Hmm.
also, over the course of the campaign, think it would be cool to let them keep their characters and they play with like an adjusted or a different like game rule set for like a session.
I think it works really well for adjusting characters. That part is pretty easy for it. I think the issue with Time Watch is it's a very different system than D&D. Um, it's it's designed for detective work where like your characters observe a change in the present and they have to go back in time to figure out what caused it, which might end up
Mm.
bringing them into the future from whatever they consider to be the present. Because time travelers usually come from the future where time travel has been invented. Um, and you have like the set timeline, then you have to undo whatever the time traveler did and then find them and figure out why they did it and stop them or fix whatever problem caused them to do it in the first place.
Is it like
Um,
really physical things related, or does it end up being like a lot of theater of the mind?
it's more theater of the mind. Usually, you are not doing some sort of battle on a battle mat kind of stuff.
Right.
Um, like I said, it's more detective work, so you're usually using your abilities to figure things out instead of to accomplish something physical.
Yeah, I definitely need to look into that. I do appreciate now, especially more than ever, seeing these different like systems of play and how varied the TTRPG rule sets can get.
Yeah, I'm giving you a very like glossy overview of it at the moment. Um, I think one cool thing that you might end up using just as a quick grab your attention kind of thing, there is a weapon in it called the Tomorrow Sniper Rifle, where when you look through the scope, you see the same space 24 hours in the future, and when you fire the gun, it shoots a bullet 24 hours into the future.
What?
The game uses that as like the way that JFK was actually assassinated, is like someone
Uh,
shot him from a day before, so that's why you have to investigate and find that out or something.
I don't want to get us on any watch lists here, but that's how I would have done it.
um, there's another one called the grandfather bullet that when you shoot someone goes back in time and kills their grandfather, so they never existed. Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, that one's that one you get your little paradox points for, but sometimes it's worth it. Yeah, so you've got the time travel stuff for your campaign where people are trying to recreate the collide, and part of that means they have like these sort of recipe things they have to do to create that, and part of that is creating these little time rifts. Is that the concept?
The time travelers are not necessarily causing the collide with their time rifts. This is like the party of that chaotic third party that's showing up that's
Oh,
bringing
okay.
the adventurers. Yeah, so they're not specifically related to the collide, but one of them does have ties to it. Like one of the time travelers absolutely has deep ties into the collide, and he like I'll just tell you because you're never gonna play it. No, he one of the time travelers got screwed over by one of the three people that like originally incepted the collide as his lackey. He ended up being like the fall guy for it. And
Okay.
so he discovered the ability to time travel, and he's using that kind of as his vengeance to just sort of sow discord between the two groups.
Okay. So this is, you said there was three? I thought it was just the one guy at
So
Elton.
the collide happened because of the emperor of Elton, who also named himself after the city that he's the emperor of by changing his name. But anyways, so there's that guy, and then he had a buddy who was one of the sort of higher ups at Emerald Lake, and then there was a third person with them, and these ended up being the players, the characters that the players inhabited as part of the flashback.
Oh,
But
cool.
yeah, so they ended up being in the room and part of the reason that the collide happened the first time. And they kind of got duped into doing that by this time traveler guy who's super angry. And it's because he worked for one of the guys that they ended up landing in.
So does he sort of like create the scenario that causes him to hate people and want to create the scenario?
Not quite, almost, but no, he is just kind of working for them and not sure what's happening the first time the collide happens. And so with time magic trickery, he uh, understands what happens and then goes to various points to kind of exacerbate the problem of people trying to make it happen for the second time. For whatever reason, he hasn't really gone back to mess around with the first collide. Um,
Yeah, I was gonna ask, why doesn't he just, if he's got time travel, why not just go back and make it so that,
and stop the first one from happening.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the danger of time travels. You get these like fun like holes like that. Like one, they'll just do the thing. And the answer is I haven't figured that part out yet, but I know that's a thing we have to have figured out when they get there.
Well, I think Tomorrow War had a pretty good answer for that, is they weren't sure if that would fix stuff or if it would be like a huge space-time continuum disaster.
Yeah, that's
Have you seen that
honestly
movie?
yeah, I have. Yeah, that's honestly probably the direction that I would just kind of instinctually take it in. But also I just love the idea of referring to other stuff. So that's also probably another thing I'm just gonna directly rip off the campaign.
I mean, that's such a small thing. I wouldn't really say that's ripping off, but
Fair. Yeah, but um I'll just have to find I'll have to come up with a good Chris Pratt impersonation.
well, yeah, then that could be what's going on for this guy, where he's scared of creating paradoxes. But you said the players altered the past, so maybe he feels like he can do that now, but it would create a paradox for his own identity for where he is now, because then he wouldn't, there would be no event that created him.
Yeah, that's true. I think that would probably be some of it too. Is like if he's kind of lucky to be here at all, the last thing he probably wants to do while causing discord for others is jeopardize his own position.
Right. I think we've hit most of the main points that I wanted to get to. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about for your campaign?
I mean, just as like a newbie DM, it's definitely been like a really interesting experience trying to like come up with like the bones and structure of a world and then have the players start to inhabit it with their characters and what it's caused in terms of filling things out. I think if anybody is like listening to this, I hope that they're sort of encouraged to maybe go invent their own thing or try to repurpose stuff if they've ever wanted to do their own kind of homebrew campaign. Uh, but I don't have anything else that I really wanted to like talk too much about with it. You definitely hit like all the big points for me on it that I like talking about.
Hmm.
Um, if anybody's interested in hearing the nonsense of the Collide, my podcast is called Crash Course DM, and it's for the most part me documenting my journey becoming a dungeon master, where I'm like I set goals for myself with the players. I used to try to call the shot about what I thought was going to happen in the session, but now I treat it as like tool for me. Like at the start, I talk about what I want to accomplish as a DM and what I think will happen. And then we play the session and then we debrief with our hearts and wishes section of like, how do they think I did with my goals? And how do I think I did? What did we like or want to change? And like get notes for next time. So it's a fun way to see the evolution of a D&D session. And it takes place in this world for the most part until we break out and play in other systems, but it's a good time. And it's
Yeah,
on
that does
all
sound
the
like a really cool like audio documentary of your experience. Diary, I guess.
Yeah, it's part Dungeon Master's diary and part live play essentially.
Yeah. So usually what I ask DMs is, do you have any advice for other DMs? But I guess in your case, what might be a better question is there any particular piece of DMing advice that you have found really helpful for yourself?
Yeah, so there are a lot of really good gems that I've received, thankfully on recording, so I can refer back to them. But in particular, like the thing that stands out for me the most is in trying to get players to understand what options are available to them. And they talk about this in the Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master from Sly Flourish a little bit too, but
Hmm.
engaging with the senses of the players, I have found to be like beyond sight. I have been found to be wildly helpful for like even explaining puzzles for them in ways that were really hard for me. Like we had an adventure where I was trying to get them to go through. I was like, "There's a door here," and they didn't go through the door because they didn't find a hidden switch because I didn't describe things in a way that they knew they could interact with it. And they ended up jumping down into a dark pit instead, where there was like a button to open the door if they had just. So I'd like learned better how to tee things up like that instead of just describing the stuff in the room. Talk about how the air flows below the door, or you can smell, like dust from a recent cave in, or like using elements of the world to tell the characters what they can do without literally telling the characters what they can do.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's something that I've not doing as much as I wanted to, like describing the way things smell. Um, and touch is another one, like feeling the air. That's one that I, I feel like I never do when I'm DMing. I'm
Hmm.
usually very sight, sound. I don't know. Taste usually doesn't come up even if you're trying to include the other senses. But
True, yeah. Very true.
yeah,
Uh,
usually I'm describing things very sight and sound and leaving out smell and touch.
One of my buddies who plays with us, his name is Chris. He's really good at that. He's really good at just like we're doing he's in the DM chair for in a few episodes for a few episodes while one of our guys is out, and just like listening to him, like he'll describe this environment and like how one of the guys like bit a leaf on a tree to figure out what it was like, and he was telling him the like coppery iron like without telling him he had a mouthful of blood, he very clearly described that this guy had a mouthful of blood. It was wild.
That's cool. Okay. Well, yeah, if there's nothing else, I think we're all good. You feel good?
Yeah, I feel good. I appreciate you letting me come onto the show and just pontificate about this place I invented. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to catching some more of the show.
The other Bang like game that I've played before that's I mean it feels like it when you play it, but it's not actually that similar, I guess. It's a game called Samurai.
Hmm.
That's a old card game that's out of print now, so that one might be harder to find than Cash and Guns, but
Yeah, I haven't played that one.
not many people have. I think the full name of it is Honor of the Samurai. when that it's a bit different in character. Like you're playing like a samurai family that's trying to like take over Japan by gaining a certain amount of honor points that you get every turn. Um, and it's got rules for like simulating war and ninja assassinations. And there is a dishonorable firearms card. Probably more I'm thinking of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which gives you lots of military points, but means that you get less honor. It actually gives you negative honor.
Interesting. They didn't mention the honor point system in the Shogun show.
Um, yeah, that's kind of where it breaks down. Like what winning in the game means is like having enough honor, and the best honor card in the game for samurai is the Shogun card, which you can only get by defeating the previous Shogun. So a lot of the game revolves around trying to kill the Shogun and take the Shogun card for yourself.
But also staying honorable.
Yes, which sometimes I don't think any of us has ever done like an honorable playthrough. We always end up using ninjas and the gunpowder weapons and just going for that. But yeah, I've always been curious if you could play it where you are a good guy and if that actually is better than the other option.
Have you seen the show on Hulu?
I've wanted to watch it and I started a little bit, but I feel like I got kids running around. It's a show that's kind of harder to watch with them around because it's got subtitles
yeah.
and the more graphic moments for it. So
Very true. Very true.
I've started watching it for like 10 minutes and I was like, yeah, probably don't want to watch this. So it's something I got to watch after they go to bed.
I haven't read the books, but I did watch what I guess is out of the first season, and it's definitely on a very similar track. You're hitting like oddly very, very, very similar themes with what this card game is about.
Well, I would bet that the people who made the card game read the book.
Yeah, there's probably there's probably a direct line there you could draw. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and the book is also like based off of real stuff, so there's things in the card game that are meant to be like, here's a specific place that exists, and now you have that as like your castle, and that's it's a piece, and then it has like in the rule book it explains like here's where this is and how it was relevant in the war, like this is Nobunaga's castle or something like that.
That's actually pretty cool. Dang.
So it can actually like the game isn't intending to be educational, but you can actually learn some stuff by reading in the rule book if you're interested.
I feel like I'm gonna have to go do a Wikipedia deep dive on Honor of the Samurai after this, and go learn about the origins of this game.
Oh man, there's so much weird stuff related to samurai. Another deep dive into historical fiction, but there is another good anime movie called, I think it's called Honor of the Ninja.
I've seen that.
No, that's not it.
Wrath of the Ninja, maybe?
Wrath of the Ninja. Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Oh, I feel like I've seen parts of this. I recognize some of the like bad guys or some of the scenes.
Yeah, that's another historical fiction one where Nobunaga is actually like a evil demon, and like there's 3 ninja that are supposed to be able to banish him back to the demon plane.
Yeah. Huh.
All right, off topic. Let's
Sorry,
swerve
yeah,
back.
yeah. We've the rabbit trail is long.
Yes. Quick reminder that I'm looking for people to go on the show, so if you or someone you know would be interested, please direct yourself or them to gocorral.com/STS for instructions on how to become a guest on Setting the Stage. That's GOCORRAL.com/STS. Thank you.